Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to walk you through the complete process of how you can create this animation from scratch. We're going to take it slow, step by step, so even if you're a beginner, you'll be able to follow along without any confusion. So let's jump right into the process. Our first step is to create a new file named index.html. We'll first set up our basic structure, things like the boilerplate and the navigation bar, because having a clean starting point makes the rest of the work much easier. After that, we'll divide the body into two main sections, the header and the main section, so our layout stays organized as we move forward. Now, in the header section, we're going to add a div with the class name navbar. This will act as the container for our navigation elements. Now let me explain how the navigation bar structure is going to look. I'll break it down into small, simple parts so that if you're a beginner, you won't face any confusion. And if you're not a beginner, you can feel free to skip this part. First, we have the outer div that we already created, the navbar. Inside this navbar, we'll have three main elements: a logo, a menu, and a call to action div. These three parts together will make up the complete structure of our navigation bar. As we just discussed, we're going to have three main elements inside our navbar: a logo, a menu, and a call to action section. In the logo div, we're simply going to add a p tag to display our logo text. And in the menu div, we'll add an unordered list that contains 4 list items. Now we'll do the same for the call to action section. And that's it. We're completely done with our navigation bar in HTML. Now it's time to move on to the CSS part. So the next step is to create a new file and name it style.css. And now, go ahead and link the CSS file to your HTML. First, we're going to reset the global CSS. This helps us start with a clean and consistent base by removing all the default browser styles. Now let's move on to styling the body. First, we're going to give it a background color, and the exact color code will be shown on the screen. Now just follow along and do it exactly the way I'm doing it. For the logo, we're styling the p tag by giving it a larger font size and a bold weight, so the logo stands out clearly in the navbar. First, let's style the menu links inside the list. Here we're removing the underline by setting text decoration to none. Then we set the font size to 16 pixels, the font weight to 400, and the color to gray. We're also using the Inter font family to keep the navigation text clean and modern. Next, we'll style the active state of the menu link. So we increase the font weight to 600 and change the color to black. This makes the active page stand out clearly from the rest of the menu items. And finally, let's style the menu container itself. We remove the default bullet points by setting list style, none, turn the list into a flex layout, and add a 45 pixel gap between each item. Now let's style the call to action button. We start with the CTA container. giving it a height of 51 pixels and a width of 100 pixels. We use Flexbox to center everything perfectly, both vertically and horizontally. Then we apply a golden background color using hashtag D8B325 to make the button stand out. Next, we style the text inside the button using CTAP tag. Here, we set the font size to 16 pixels, the font weight to 500, and make the text white so it pops nicely against the button's background. Now we set up our navbar container. First, we make it a flex container, align all items to the center, and use justify content, space between. After that, we add our spacing, 120px padding on both sides and 20px on top T. And with that, we're completely done styling our navigation bar. I've also added a few extra fonts to give the logo a cleaner and more stylish look. Now let's start writing the code for the main part. So go ahead and come back to the HTML file and create a div with the class name hero section. Now, inside the hero section, we're going to create three main parts: text, images, and the base. And in the text section, we're going to create three h1 tags, all with the common class name car name. This will help us target and animate them easily. Now we'll do the same thing for the image section. Add three images, and give all of them the same class name cars, so we can animate them just like the text. And for the base section, just add a div with the class name base. We're not adding anything inside it right now. We'll handle all the styling for this part in the CSS. First, let me explain how we're going to animate the images. We'll place all three images horizontally in a row, and then we'll hide the overflow. This way, only the first image will be visible, and the other two will stay hidden until we animate them into view. And for the text, we're going to follow the same concept. But this time, the text will be arranged vertically instead of horizontally. We'll hide two of the text elements and keep only one visible at a time, so we can animate them smoothly just like the images. And now, let's get back to our code and start implementing everything step by step. First, we're going to start by styling the base, which is the platform where the car will be placed. Just do it as I'm doing. As you can see, we're now done creating our platform. Now let's set up our hero text. First, we'll work on the hero text box, and once that's ready, we'll move on to styling the text inside it. We're setting its position, size, and layout using Flex, along with a bit of spacing. But the most important property here is overflow, hidden. This is what allows us to hide the extra text that sits outside the box, so only one line is visible at a time, which is crucial for creating that smooth vertical text animation. So now, let's move on to styling the text inside our hero text. We've set the font size to 150 pixels and the color to white, so it stands out clearly. We're also giving it a translate Y of 40 pixels to position it slightly downward for the animation. The transition is set to 0.6 seconds with an ease effect, so the movement looks smooth. And finally, the text is positioned absolutely with its opacity set to 0. Now let's set up the active state for our text. In the active state, we simply set opacity to 1 and translate Y to 0. You can see the text is visible now. Now it's time to move on to the image part. Just like we did with the text section, we're now going to style the hero image div. Here we've set the height to 427 pixels and the width to 1200 pixels. It's position relative, and we're using overflow. Hidden again, so only one image stays visible while the others remain hidden for the animation. We're also using display flex to place all the images horizontally. Now let's define the state for all three images. Here's what we're applying to each image. We're setting the width and height to 100%, so the image fully covers the hero image container. The z-index is set to 10, and the image is positioned absolutely. By default, each image is placed off-screen using translate x, 100%, and its position is adjusted with top, 20%, and left, 16%. We've also added a transition of 0.8 seconds with an ease and out effect, so when the image becomes active, it slides smoothly into the center. And in the active state, we simply set transform, translate x, 0. And in the exit state, we simply set transform, translate x, minus 100%. And with that, we're also completely done with the image part. And now, let me explain how this entire animation actually works. From the left side, the new car image slides in. And at the same time, the existing image moves out toward the right. And this is how the transition happens. Now, let's move further and continue with the next part. Now let's set up our left and right buttons. We'll create two divs and give both of them the class name btn, and we'll also assign them IDs. Next for the right button and previous for the left button. Now let's add the right arrow and left arrow icons. I'm using Font Awesome for the icons, but you can use any icon set you prefer. Now let's go to our CSS file and start styling the buttons. Inside the .btn class, we've set the height and width to 51 pixels and made the buttons perfectly round using a 50% border radius. We're using Flexbox to center the arrow icons both vertically and horizontally. The background is a semi-transparent white using RGBA, which gives the buttons a clean, modern look. For the next button, we're setting its position to absolute, placing it at top, 50%, and right, 10%. This positions the button perfectly on the right side of the hero section. And now for the previous button, we're also using position, absolute, placing it at top, 50%, and left, 10%. We've added a z-index of 50 to make sure it always stays on top of the images and other elements. And we're done here. And as you can see, everything is looking perfect. Now let's go ahead and create our color palette. First, let's create the outer div and give it the class name color. This div will hold all the color options in our palette. Inside this color container, we'll add 3 color options, and each one will have the class name call. And along with the class name call, we'll also give each color its own color name class. And now, let's jump into the CSS and start styling our color palette. We've set the height to 40 pixels and the width to 100 pixels and given it a wheat background color. It's displayed as a flex container with a small 6-pixel gap, so all the color circles stay neatly spaced. We're centering everything using align items, center and justify content, center, and rounding the whole container with a 50-pixel border radius to make it look smooth and pill-shaped. The palette is positioned absolutely, placed at top, 62% and left, 42% of the hero section. And finally, we've added a soft box shadow to make it stand out from the background. Now let's style the small circles we created with the class name call. Each circle is 25 pixels in height and width, and we're giving them a 50% border radius to make them perfectly round. Now for each individual circle, we'll assign a different background color. This way, every circle represents a unique car color option. Now let's set up the active state for each color circle. When a color is active, we'll add a border to highlight it. Now let's create our bottom panel section. We'll start by making a container div for the bottom panel. Now we're adding the car name, and this part works exactly the same as our hero text. We'll create the same text structure, give it the same animation behavior, just slightly different styling to match the bottom panel. So simply follow along exactly the way we did with the hero text. Same logic, same flow, just a lighter version. We'll add a container with the class name boxes, and inside it we'll create 3 individual box diffs. Each box will have an H3 for the main number and a small paragraph for the label. Now let's add the description section. Inside a div with the class name price, we'll write a short description of the car, and at the end we'll place the price inside a span tag so we can style it separately. Alright, now let's switch over to our CSS file and start styling. Styling this part is super easy. Just watch what I'm doing on the screen and follow along. I'm setting the font size to 30 pixels with a soft dark color and placing it right at the top left using absolute positioning. Just like before, this text will start with 0 opacity and a downward translate. And for the active state, we simply bring the text into view. So we set the opacity to 1 and reset the transform back to translate Y0. And now let's style the name box. We're arranging everything in a vertical column with some spacing between each name. The height and width define the visible area, and we've set overflow to hidden so only one name shows at a time. We also add a little left padding and keep the whole box positioned relatively so all the animated text inside stays aligned properly. Now let's style our boxes. We're simply placing them side by side using flex and adding some space between each box with a gap of 20 pixels. Now let's style each of the 3 boxes. We're giving them a fixed height and width, a soft transparent background, and a subtle border to make them stand out. The rounded corners give a cleaner look. And we're using flex to center everything perfectly inside, both vertically and horizontally. And finally, a small gap between the text elements keeps the content nicely spaced. Next, let's style the text inside each box. For the heading, we're giving it a bold weight and a slightly larger font size so the stats stand out clearly. And for the description text, we're using a lighter weight with a smaller font size and a gray color to keep it subtle. Now let's style the description section in our down panel. First, we're giving the entire description container a fixed width. This helps keep the text from stretching too wide and makes the layout look clean and contained. Inside this container, we have our paragraph. So for the paragraph styling, we're using a simple and readable font, and we're setting the font size to 14 pixels. The text color is a soft gray, just to keep it subtle and easy on the eyes. And finally, inside that paragraph, we have a span tag for the price. We want the price to stand out, so we're making it bold and changing the color to pure black. This way, your viewers can instantly notice it without distracting from the rest of the description. And finally, let's style the whole down panel. We're using flex to place everything in one row and space between to spread each section evenly. Then we add left and right padding to keep the panel centered and a bit of top padding so it sits nicely below the hero section. We're now completely done with our HTML and CSS. So let's jump right into the JavaScript. The first thing we're going to do is create a new file called script.js, and then link with HTML. Alright, first we're going to select all the elements we'll be working with. For the next and previous buttons, we're selecting them using their ID selectors. And for the car images and the car names, we're using query selector all since we need to grab all 3 of them at once. Now we're creating a variable called count and setting it to 0. This will act as our index. Next, we're creating a function called showNext, and this is what controls the animation when we click the next button. Inside this function, the first thing we do is remove the active class from the current car image and give it an exit class, so it slides out. We also remove the active class from the current car name. Then we update our count by adding 1, and we use the modulo to loop back to the first slide when we reach the end. Finally, we activate the new slide. So we remove the exit class from the next image, add the active class to it, and also activate the matching car name. This entire function handles the transition from one slide to the next. Now we're calling the function by adding an event listener to the next button. So whenever we click on the next button, it triggers the showNext function and moves the animation forward. Now let's select the rest of the elements we'll need, like the color options, the heading, the call to action button. And for the CTA button colors, we're going to create an array that stores all the color options. We'll do the same for the body background colors. And now we're going to do the exact same steps for the heading and the color options as well. To change the button color and the body background color, we're simply updating their styles using the current index. So we set the body's background color to body color count, and then we set the CTA button's background color to BTN color count. For the previous slide, we just changed the index to move backward using this formula. Count equals count 1 plus cars.length %cars.length. That's it. And everything is same as shown next. You can watch in the screen. And we're done. Hope you enjoyed the breakdown. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Catch you in the next video.